Hello everyone, I'm Lazy Grouse, and today we're taking a look at all the units and mechanics that the Greenskins get in SFO Grimhammer 3. So let's start with their new generic lord, or I guess Wurrzag's new generic lord, because he's exclusive to Wurrzag in campaign, the Savage Orc Warboss. And it's a caster lord with the lore of Big Wah! But since he's a Savage Orc, he's actually really deadly in combat, since he got good attack and damage, and Frenzy for even more attack and damage. But you have to be a little bit careful with him, since he's a bit squishy with low armor and defense, but he's also a Savage Orc, so he does have some physical resist, which helps mitigate damage at least. He also have the abilities Bolster Defense, which buffs all allies in range with some defense and charge defense, and Larger Proper Smash, which is an ability that all elite orc units get, and it gives them an attack and vigor buff that grows the longer they fight. And he of course also gets a pig mount if you want him to be a little bit more mobile. They also get forest goblins as a new low tier chaff unit, and they're very similar to normal goblins, but with a little bit more attack and damage, and with anti-large and deadly poison for a nice debuff and some damage over time. So they're much deadlier than normal goblins, but they also got less armor and defense, so they're even squishier than basic goblins. But they also have some utility with Strider and Stalk, so you can use them to sneak up on enemy backline units, and they also have the ability Proper Smash, which is a smaller version of the ability that all low tier units have, and it buffs melee attack and leadership at the cost of melee defense, and the effect grows the longer they are in combat. They also get some bigger infantry with the Boneclubber tribe, which is the biggest and baddest Savage Orc version, and they got really good attack and damage with magic attacks and banish, and of course Frenzy and Larger Proper Smash for even more damage. So they're incredibly deadly, especially against units that rely on physical resistance like demons. But since they are Savage Orcs, they also rely heavily on their own pretty good physical resistance, because they got pretty low defense and no armor. So pretty much all damage mitigations is from their physical resistance, so they also get countered pretty well by magic attacks. And next we got what's probably my favorite SFO unit, the biggest murder meatball, the Colossal Squigg. And it's incredibly fast and really deadly, especially against infantry with 50 bonus versus infantry, very good attack and damage, most of which is AP, and a really high charge bonus. Unfortunately, they don't seem to want to just crash through infantry units when they charge, but once they get in there, they start thrashing around and scatter bodies around them, and just seem to be having the best of times, which is very fun to watch. They are a bit squishy though, with medium armor, low melee defense, and pretty small health pool. They do buff allies with Puff Spores, which gives all allies in range melee defense, and it's basically always active as long as they're in battle. It doesn't buff themselves though, but if you bring two of them, they can just buff each other. They also have Squigs Go Wild for leadership and damage, and Fungoid Squig Explosion, which summons a unit of Squig herds if it dies, which, considering its defenses, isn't too unlikely. And next we got some new Black Orc variants with shields, and they're really tanky with good melee defense, silver shields and expert charge defense, but they lose some melee attack and quite a bit of damage compared to the normal Black Orcs. And then we got the legendary version of Black Orcs as well, the Immortulz. And they're a Grimgor exclusive units, and they're both deadlier and tankier than normal Black Orcs, so they're a beast in combat. But they also make all your characters in an area deadlier and tankier with the Immortulz cloak. So you can just group these guys with Grimgor and your characters and just slaughter anything in your path. They also got the Bony Boys, which is an undead unit of orc boys, and it's only available to Azhag for obvious reasons, but they're only a summon that is tied to Azhag's campaign mechanics, so you can't really have a full army of skeleton orcs. And you probably wouldn't want to anyway, unless you wanted a challenge, because they're about as deadly as orc boys, but much squishier and worse leadership, so they will crumble easily. But since they're a summon, they're very expendable, and they're great at taking out backline units like artillery or archers. And finally, we got the Greenskins' biggest unit, the Savage Rogue Idol. And it's the centerpiece of Wurrzag's campaign army, because it's unique to Wurrzag and he will buff it throughout the campaign. And it is big, really deadly, and also really tanky. But these stats aren't really reflective of how it is in campaign, because it starts really small and kinda wimpy, but it gets much better over time thanks to Wurrzag. And it's got so many abilities, it's kinda ridiculous. It's got Bone Cracker on attack, which lowers leadership, defense, speed and armor, Earth Shaker to deal damage around it, Bolster Armor to buff armor and resistance around it, Spirit of Gork and Mork for some leadership for all units map wide, Rubble and Ruin, which deals damage in an area around it as it falls apart when it takes damage, and when it does, it loses some of its armor but becomes faster and deadlier, Greater Magic Bond, which increases your power recharge and gives you more reserve, Trample for even more damage around it in combat, and Recovery for a small amount of regeneration. But that's all the units, so let's take a look at their campaign. So the biggest change to the Greenskins as a whole is probably their buildings, because almost all their buildings require population now, which sounds really bad, but their growth is ridiculous in SFO, which makes sense since they reproduce incredibly fast in the lore because of their weird spores. Their infrastructure buildings have also changed quite a bit. The boss's tent and territory markers are actually mostly the same, but with some added effects like recruitment cost reduction and growth to adjacent provinces. But they also got some new ones like the shroom chain for growth and upkeep reduction and replenishment. They also got the captives buildings for some control, diplomatic relations good and bad, growth to all provinces, and some post-battle captives to all armies. But the building change that probably has the biggest impact to the faction is the shiny stuff chain. Because instead of a flat sum, it now gives a percentage increased income from buildings and some growth, and since it doesn't produce a flat sum anymore, which was kinda the backbone of the settlement income from the Greenskins, this means the economy of the Greenskins is much more reliant on raiding and sacking, since your settlement won't produce as much money as it usually does. And they also have a whole new category with 4 new building chains. The Tower, which gives reputation each turn, extra movement range, raiding income, and recruitment cost reduction faction-wide and some local recruitment capacity. The Spire chain increases research, lower construction costs both locally and faction-wide, more income from buildings in adjacent provinces, and lower upkeep for goblins, squigs, artillery, and spiders while growth is high, so most goblin-themed units. The Fort chain lowers the movement of enemies in the province, lowers siege attrition, increases melee attack faction-wide, increases damage to your armies in the province, and lowers upkeep for orc units while high growth. And the Altar chain gives extra movement range and vigor loss reduction in the province, lower corruption, increased charge bonus and leadership faction-wide, more unit capacity for Boneclubber tribe, and lower upkeep for savage orcs, trolls, wyverns, idols, and giants while growth is high. And the final tier of each of these buildings also unlocks the new greenskin technologies, which is kinda themed similarly to the buildings. Orky Forts unlocks text that buffs your boys, biggins, and black orcs. The Goblin Metropolis unlocks the tech that buffs your goblin-themed units like goblins, squigs, artillery, and spiders. Shrine to Gork and Mork unlocks the tech that buffs your savage orcs and monstrous units. And the Uber Mega Tower unlocks tech that's just kind of a mishmash of random stuff. And they come in pairs, where the first one is just a straight up buff, and the second one increasing that buff but adds a negative modifier. They also got a new stance, the Wah Begins, which gives you some reputation to start gathering a Wah, and some unit experience faction-wide and charge bonus at the cost of 25% movement. They also got some faction-wide effects with their post-combat options, with Slaughter Captives giving faction-wide control, Eat gives faction-wide replenishment and growth, and Ransom lowers upkeep faction-wide. And their legendary lords also got some really fun stuff, so let's go and take a look at them. And first up we got Grimgor, and his main faction mechanic is that he is the biggest and the best, because every 6th level Grimgor gets gives him a dilemma where he can choose between 4 permanent buffs that either buffs Grimgor directly or your entire faction. And these can be pretty powerful, so the bigger and stronger Grimgor gets, the more buffs he and his faction gets. He also wants to hunt down as many legendary lords as possible, because each one of them he kills, he gets 5% extra damage, so he can become insane with the right buffs and killing enough legendary lords. And the armies in his faction also got a fightiness meter that will give the armies some nice buffs if it's kept nice and high, from fighting and winning of course, and going around in enemy territory. Because it gives you extra melee attack for lords and heroes, physical resistance for boys, biggins and black orcs, and everything gets melee attack when fighting chaos dwarves. And as you get higher fightiness, these bonuses doubles and gives you movement after winning a battle. But if you're being too passive or lose battles, your fightiness is gonna start to drop, and once it goes below 40, your goblins, squigs, artillery and spider units start to lose more vigor, because I guess the orcs start to take out their frustration on them, which is pretty flavorful, and if things are going really bad and your fightiness goes below 20, the same units loses even more vigor. He also gets all character recruitment unlocked from the start, which is very nice. Orc units at rank 7 or above causes fear, and all of his boys, biggins and black orcs have an extra 10 armor, because Grimgor's boys are the hardest boys. And next we got Azhag, and his mechanics all revolve around the Crown of Sorcery, because the Crown keeps whispering things to him and try to control him, but he's kinda too dumb and stubborn to be controlled, so it's more like suggestions. And this is somehow a currency that he mostly gets from fighting battles, and you're capped at 25 to start, but once you get the Crown of Sorcery, that's bumped up to 50. And just having some of the resource is gonna give you some protection from attrition, and the ability the Undead Wah, which is how you summon the Bony Boys, and at lower amounts of the resource only Azhag can use it, but eventually all your armies will be able to use it. But you can also use your Whispers of Nagash by hitting the Crown's Whispering button. It costs 25 Whispers, and you get a quest where you get to choose between 4 different races to kill, and it will give you some really nice faction-wide bonuses in flavor with the selected faction up front, and even more if you complete the quest along with some extra goodies. And then we got Skarsnik, and he's the original Goblin campaign, but didn't really have any mechanics to buff them. So he got a new mechanic, the Warlord's Orders, which lets you spend 100 scrap to get some big buffs to your Gobos, Squigs, Artillery and Spider units. And there's a lot of buffs to choose from. Shroom Jerky gives Vigor Regen when out of combat and more XP. Cunning Sneaks gives them charge bonus, devastating flanker and speed. Spring the Trap gives you a Doom Diver Strike army ability and charge deflection and charge defense. Thief for the Lads lowers recruitment cost and upkeep. And Gobo War Painting gives physical resistance to high ranking units. So there's a lot of flexibility to your unit buffs depending on what you need. And Skarsnik also got some change to his trait, because besides the normal stuff, he gives 100 extra growth to local regions and gives all of his characters action success chance. He also gets Masterful Ambush Stance, which only costs 10 movement points, and it gives you an extra 20% chance of intercepting underway. And Skarsnik and Night Goblin Warbosses also increases Vigor Loss Reduction and Replenishment for Night Goblin units depending on their character rank. And all characters gets double the experience. And next we got Wurrzag. And his biggest new addition to the campaign is the Savage Rogue Idol. And you can recruit it from the Savage Orc camp at tier 3, but it starts out pretty wimpy. I mean, it can still stomp some stunties, but it's a bit fragile and not even close to as strong as it can be. Because Wurrzag got a brand new skill line that unlocks automatically as you level, and you get a bunch of buffs to your Savage units, Shamans and Giants. And starting from level 20, the Savage Rogue Idol is gonna start to grow as you level until it's the ridiculous big chungus that you saw earlier. Other than that, he also gets the Savage Orc War Boss, so if you want to, you can make sure that all of your armies is just all Savage. And as long as your units have more than 75% health, they all got perfect vigor. But that's about it for Wurrzag. And Grom doesn't really get anything new, but he doesn't really need it either since he has one of the most fun campaign mechanics anyway. So that's all the units and mechanics for the Greenskins in SFO Grimhammer 3. So what do you think of the Greenskin stuff, and who do you think got the best mechanics? But that's gonna be it for now, so thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed the video or found it helpful, then leave a like, comment and subscribe for more, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.